Hello, my name is Dennis Daly, and I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And today I have the privilege of interviewing Mr. James Carr. It is December 13th, 2006, and we're at the main library. And our camera operator today is Leanne McNabb. Mr. Carr, thank you for agreeing to do the interview with us. And we were actually just sitting down talking. I thought we could start off with what we were talking about. Tell us a little bit about what you did before you got into the Army and how you actually ended up getting in the Army.
Well, it started out, this is 1943. All my friends, a little bit older than me, were going into the service. And I was a senior in high school. This was, I think, October of 1942. October of 1942. And I walked down, this was in Newport, Kentucky. I walked down Mama Street and I saw the draft board, and I went in and talked to the people at the draft board and asked them if I could sign up for early drafting. And they told me that I could, and that they said that they would call me immediately after my graduation. And they did. I graduated on June 2nd of 1943, and I was in the Army June 15th of 1943, so it was pretty abrupt. My mother didn't know that I had signed up early, and she was a little bit upset that the notice came so quick. And she said, and I told her, and then I finally had to tell her that I signed up early. And she said, well, gee, and I said, well, I was going to have to go sooner or later. And she said she would have preferred later, well, like most mothers would.
Sure.
But anyway, that's how I went, and I went from there to Fort Thomas, and then this is the Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and I had a lot of first uniform I ever had, and then the first train ride I ever had when I got on the train and went down to Texas. These are...
How long of a ride was that?
I'm sorry?
How long of a train ride was that from Cincinnati to Texas? How long did that take?
It goes back, you're talking about 65 years or so. I think it was overnight. I'm not quite sure, but I think it was overnight. It was, and then the thing about it, another thing that happened at Fort Thomas, when I went into Fort Thomas, they had a great big barracks with a whole bunch of guys and nobody that I knew. Then all of a sudden, the second day, there was some other group came in, and two of the guys from my high school class happened to be there also. And of course, I went to Newport Catholic High School over in Newport, and we had a small class. There was only 35 in our graduating class, and they had 3 of us in the same, going into the Army together was pretty cool. Well, anyway, we did go. We went down to Texas, and the one boy, Eddie Poose was his name, who became a very good friend of mine. Well, the other boy did too. His name was Kenny Klinkenberg, and if you ever heard of Klinkenberg hardware stores, he was part of the one in Dayton. But he got transferred out of our department because he had knowledge of supply business. He became a supply sergeant, and he was transferred to another. But Eddie and I stayed the whole route. We went on furloughs together, and we shared food and different things from home, letters and so forth and so on. And in the Battle of the Bulge and so forth, we shared a foxhole, and we only had 1 pair of gloves and 1 blanket. And you can imagine how we had to cuddle up, and we changed the gloves once in a while so that neither one of our hands froze. And we were at this particular time on an outpost in front of a minefield that we had put down. And it was difficulty. First of all, the ground was so hard, and there was snow on the ground, digging into the ground. So I had to get some logs and rocks and so forth to put around the top of it. But around dawn, coming out of over the hill of this particular place was 4 German tanks. The rumbling sound as it came. And I hope I don't hurt your feelings, but on this, I think both of us, when we sat there and we saw this, and we said, oh shit, it kind of upset us a little bit, And of course, we hunkered down more and because even, you know, I asked them later on, what the hell was we doing out there in an outpost in front of a minefield? They couldn't explain that to me, only that this lieutenant we had, that's what he wanted. But we were so forced, and God was with me for a lot of time. But as it got closer, it was only maybe 150 yards away. For some particular reason, the Germans decided to go left and went down into the valley to the left. So, you know, there was many times that, you know, I had some scary incidents, but you know, the first time you're there and you've been under, well, we were under fire a few other times when we built some bridges, but that time was, you know, was in a little area.
Let's go back a little bit. You said that you started your basic training in Texas.
Yeah, at Camp Bowie in Brownwood, Texas.
And what were you already in the unit that you went over to Europe with, or did they form that unit while you were down in Texas?
Well, we had basic training.
Okay.
We had went through basic training, and after basic training, we went to Louisiana for maneuvers. Okay. And that was, you know, we learned how to build these Bailey bridges and fix bridges. We learned how to. I'd never fired a rifle before in my rifle. Learned about, you know, firing a rifle and how to march. And I found out about Army discipline too. You know, those are the kind of things that are, you know, ingrained in you. But yes, it was. But I kind of was excited about it. You know, my first time in a uniform and have a bunch of guys. It was almost like a big football team. You know, and we're all you know, we're all together in this particular thing. And then when you took your 20-mile hikes, that was tough, especially in that real hot Texas weather, you know, and especially with a big heavy pack on your back. But we all made it. We made it together. And that's the one thing that got me about being in service, was the camaraderie. You know, guys helping each other, looking out for each other, and all the way on through the whole thing. And when somebody got hurt or was missing or something, it was like you lost part of your family. You know, it's just that you were so close to some of the guys. And just like I showed you a picture there of John Swanson, you know, when we were over the Battle of the Bulge, I'm going to go back to this, but when we were in the Battle of the Bulge, we were attached to the 26th Division, and they lost some troops, and they needed some replacement. So they took replacements from our company, and so there was, I think, 6 guys that were taken from our company, and one was John Swanson. And the second day he was away, they told me later on, one of the guys that was with him told me that they were sitting around eating their K ration, and all of a sudden the Germans threw in some mortars, and they all ran for their foxhole. Well, just as he was getting into his foxhole, a mortar hit right down into the foxhole and completely decapitated him. Of course, he wasn't, I got to say, he didn't suffer, but I suffered when I found out that he was gone. You know, I think about it, you know, every once in a while.
Sure.
Yeah, so, yeah. Anyway.
So after basic, you went into maneuvers?
We went to maneuvers, and then from basic training, we had one last furlough that we came home. So, and we knew that we were going, and that was a trying time, you know, coming home and family for the last time. My grandmother and my mother and my sisters and brothers and everybody around, knowing that I was going to go overseas, and the tears and all this. But my father, he was the one that got me. He stood back. He was old, well, partially German, and you know, they don't give with their emotion. They don't, you know, they love you, but they can't tell you that.
Sure.
But anyway, as I was leaving, he finally came forward, and he kind of like put out his hand, but he couldn't, but I could see there was tears in his eyes. And to this day, my father is, you know, such a great man, and I miss him, you know, and that I can still see him, you know, that particular time. And it was a trying time for me to see him, you know, so that hurt. But anyway,
Were you, just a quick question, were you the only boy in your family, or did you have any brothers?
I'm sorry?
Did you have any brothers, or were you the only?
Well, yeah, I had the 3 brothers. They're all younger than me.
Okay, so they didn't go overseas during the war?
Yes, my brother Tom got in the Navy. He was over in China. My brother Bob didn't go in. My brother Jack went in the Air Force, and I don't think he went overseas.
Okay.
And my sister Claire became a nun. So
Okay.
I guess that's the same.
But you were the first.
Huh?
You were the first in your family.
Yeah, that's right.
So then you went overseas, and I don't know if you want to talk about the trip over.
We took the train from Camp Bowie. We took it up to Boston, to Camp Miles Standish in Boston. And then on July the 3rd of 1944, we loaded onto the USS Uruguay, part of a large convoy, going overseas. And here I, 4th of July, there was no fireworks on 4th of July when we were probably one day out or something like that, but it brought back all the great memories I've had about the 4th of July because, with the fireworks, and that was so much, that was a fun day when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we went to England and went to Liverpool, and then from Liverpool we were sent to a place called Doddington Hall, which is, it was for English soldiers. And we were there for about, I think, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. And then we shipped out and went and then took the boat, or the LSTs or whatever they were, across the sea, and we went to Utah Beach. Now I can tell you that this is one of the big things in my life, is my first day in France. First day in France, okay. I'm in the first squad of the first platoon of A Company. And I don't know how many people or how many, but all the vehicles got off, and we had to have road guides because it was pitch dark. It was like 4:30 in the morning,
Okay.
and it was darker, and there was little signs on the side, mine, and so we knew that there was mines on both sides of the road. But I was the first road guide off, off right there to direct as they came off. They all came off. The last truck was to pick me up. He didn't pick me up.
He drove by you?
Here I am, a dumb 19-year-old kid, just out of high school. I'm having a hard time with English, and now I definitely can't speak French, and so anyway, and here I walked down to the beach. I said they couldn't have left me here, but anyway, they did. So anyway, the only thing for me to do was to try to start walking. So I walked, I don't know how many, and about by daylight, I reached a town called St. Miraglice. And I went there, and immediately I went to the MP station and find out what the hell I could do. And the guy told me, he said, well, there's 2 things I can do for you. He says, one, he said, I can put you into a repo depot, which is the replacement depot. And I would never see all those guys I spent with all my time with my friends. So I didn't want that. And he said, the other thing is, he said, he had a map of where our battalion was to go, and they were skirting the front, so he said, but he says, he had some recent information that St. Lo, if you've heard of St. Lo,
Mm-hmm.
St. Lo was just taken, and he said, if you go through St. Lo and you can cut down, take some roads down, he said, I can't tell you exactly where they're going, but it'd be a hit and miss type of a thing. But anyway, this is what I did. I went out and started walking and hitchhiking. There was a lot of supply trucks going, and they were like what they call Red Ball Express supply truck. And I got a lot, but not just me, but there was another guy that didn't pick up. Just as I was leaving, he came along and, oh, come on, and said, well...
Was he from the same battalion?
Same company, same company, and I knew him slightly, not very, very well. Anyway, but it was nice to have a companion, going there, but he was a little bit of a disruption too. He was one of these guys that was always looking for souvenirs, going into burnt out houses and holding me up. We missed a ride because I couldn't get him back in time, and we're walking and doing this kind of, and I don't know how many miles we traveled that day, but we went, and we finally, and I think God blessed me, but anyway, went down south through, I couldn't tell you how many trucks we took, and even across some cornfields and so forth or whatever, and anyway, and we got there, and we got to this town. I didn't know what it was, but I looked up later on, it was St. Hilaire. As we came into this town, I could see down the street that there was some Army vehicles coming out of a side street. So I said, come on, Collins was the name. I said, let's go up there and we'll catch those guys and we'll get a ride. We still don't know where we're going. Anyway, but we got up to that and I ran up to that thing, and lo and behold, this is where the good Lord is with you. On the side of the trucks, it hit 249. My battalion, you know, I mean, I had all day long I'm praying and hoping and so forth. But anyway, we got a ride with him and went to the bivouac area, and of course all the guys, they thought I was lost, you know, they patted you on the back, and even our company commander, he came over and ate the meal with us. So I said, oh, what a great outfit, and it just starting out. So that was my first day in France.
So that was one day that you were trying to catch back up with your.
I'm sorry?
That was one day that you were trying to catch up with your outfit.
Yeah, that's right.
It was one more day. Okay.
That was the main thing, to try to get back with the guys that I knew it, and I did. And then of course, and then we became part of Patton's Third Army. And this is why, you know, this book that we have and so forth called, we're Patton's Bridge Builders. We built bridge all over the place, you know, and fixed up roads and took up mines, and this was all part of what engineers do. Mainly bridge building. Well, do you want me to go into a couple of those stories?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, fine. Well, one, I was on a mine detector, you know, many times, you know, and so forth. And this one particular time I was on a mine detector, we were in the process of going to put a Bailey bridge over a little, I guess it was a small river. And before you do that, you have to clean the area of any kind of mines that might be in that particular area. So this is what we did. I started to, you know, and I was kind of the lead guy up here, and I got all the way to the edge, right where the bridge had been destroyed, and because the German, right to the edge, and I had the mine detector going along here, and so on. And just as I looked down, I could see, you know, where, you know, and of course, in a couple of minutes later, you know, first of all, you see where the bullets were hit, and then later on you hear it. And then I could hear, da-da-da-da. Well, of course, I had to drop the mine detector, and then I found a little hole in the ground, and I got into it. Well, that was okay for a while, because I could get away from the machine gun. But then they started throwing in some mortars. And of course, mortars throw shrapnel all over the place. Most of the guys were still back pretty far. But how in the hell was I going to get? There was hardly any place to hide. Even going into a little shell hole like that, it wasn't very good. And the trees there wasn't that many trees to begin with. But I went back through that. But anyway, some tanks had come up, and they were firing over there, firing at the Germans and so forth.
So there were American tanks that came up behind you? They were American tanks that came up behind you?
There were guys that were following us. In fact, they were going to use the bridge as soon as we were finished. They were going to get over there. But they went over and I didn't know, but I had to find some place because these mortars were landing, and the thing that got you, the noise, you know, you don't know where to go, climb a tree, there was no, and I was afraid to leave this hole, but I had to go someplace because the mortar, you know, I'm afraid that one of them was going to land right in there with me. So here I saw all these tanks, and this one tank was just sitting there, and he was firing over it. So I thought the only thing for me, anyway, I ran up and got underneath of the tank. And well, that stopped. I thought maybe that would protect me from the mortars. But then the tank started, he didn't move forward or backwards, but he went to the side. And every time those great big tracks, I had to roll over underneath of the tank. And then I had to think, how do I want to die? On a mortar or smashed under a tank? So anyway, but finally, I decided it would be easier with a mortar, so I got out of there. But then the mortar stopped, and that was the end of that particular thing, on that particular day. So,
were you worried? Just a thought when you were running around, were you worried you were going to hit a mine? I mean, that was another problem there. The mines were still in the ground, weren't they? Or had you swept them all out?
No, I didn't. I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the sad things that happened, because we didn't get all the mines up. One of the tanks went up and went over a mine, and 4 guys were killed. And that was, of course, we didn't know them or anything like that. They weren't part of, but they were American soldiers.
Sure.
And you know, when one of those Teller mines has 12 pounds of TNT, when that goes off, the whole bottom of it just smashes the guys inside of the tank.
Okay.
So that was that wasn't a very good thing. Can we stop for a minute?
Sure.
Other thing was kind of a sad thing for me. I was on another time. We were preparing to build another bridge, and I was alongside, and I was on the right side of the road, and I had the mine detector, you know, checking the side of the road, because when our vehicles come up, they just don't stay on the road, so we had to clean up. But as I went off the side of the road a little bit on the right side, I could see back in the woods a little bit. There was something that was a different color. And anyway, but I walked back there, and here was a German soldier. I guess he had died the day before, but he was propped up against a tree like this with his back, and his hands were out like, his feet were out like that. And, you know, he had been dead maybe a day or so or something like that, but it looks like he must have walked, and he just sat down there to die. And, but anyway, I looked at him and so forth, and there was nothing. But I noticed his hand was on the ground like this, and underneath of his hand was a photograph. And it kind of got my interest anyway. I took it, but there was 2 photographs. The one photograph was a picture of a girl, a pretty girl, which I thought maybe his wife or his girlfriend or something like that. And the other picture was a picture of 2 women, 2 older women. And I guess one was older than the other, and I figured that was his grandmother and his mother. But the part that got me, they were sitting on a couch, and behind them, in the middle behind them, was a crucifix. And the crucifix was almost identical to the crucifix that my mother and father had above their bed back in Southgate, you know, and it kind of brought back a lot of memories. And then then it kind of got to me, you know. Then I got to think, I had to think for this boy, he was close to my age, you know, and I was thinking, gee, what happened? And there's going to be a lot of misery back in his home down in Germany. It's the same way there's going to be, if something like that would happen to me, that my mother and grandmother and so forth, they would be real misery for me. But the more I thought about it and I saw that picture, and I don't know why, I guess it was homesickness or something, but I started to cry, you know, it's just one of those things that happen to you. Anyway, and then I looked at his face again, and he didn't look like it. I say, this is a German? He don't look, I don't know, he had the kind of hair he had. His hair was cut like one of the guys I used to play baseball with back in Southgate. And I thought, gee, at another time and another place, you know, we could have been friends, maybe, you know, wars are a bitch. You know, why do we, you like to, you know, we don't need, I don't know, it just made me feel so let down. And anyway, but the only thing I could say, he didn't have any weapon. The only thing he had there was his helmet. And as I left, I picked up his helmet, and I still got that helmet today.
Oh, yeah?
And it kind of reminds me, you know, I don't know where that boy was from or anything about him, but, you know, but thinking that it was a sad time for me. I guess I must be the only soldier in the American Army that ever cried over a German soldier.
Probably not.
Well, no, I don't.
I'm sure other people have had that same experience. So after you met up with your battalion again in France, tell me a little bit about what happened between that and the beginning of the Battle of the Bulge. That would have probably been about 3 months.
Yeah, well, actually, the Bulge started, let's see, we got into France in August. Okay. The Bulge started in the middle of December. And as we went across, we couldn't catch Patton. Patton wanted to be the first one in Berlin. That was his whole objection. He wanted to get some publicity or so forth. Anyway, but And we were in the different places that we built bridges. You know, I was listing here some of the, no, I don't have it listed here, some of the different towns, but mainly the Moselle. Moselle was the river at Toul, at Pont-à-Mousson, at Nancy, and we built bridges here. Some of them were Bailey bridges, some of them were fixed bridges, and at Toul we put up a bridge, and then they had a big flood and it washed out most of the other bridges, but ours was the only one that stood. And we got a special commendation because our bridge, you know, stood that. But after that was over, we moved down to on the Saar River, which is actually pretty close to Germany. And as we were there, and this happened on about the middle of December, and our officer in charge, he got notice that the Germans had broke through and that we were to leave that area and go up and to relieve, you know, and go into Luxembourg, to Biegenville in Luxembourg, and to relieve the 4th Infantry Division, which we did. And we got there, we went into Foxhole, because prior to that we were moving so fast that we weren't really in Foxhole. We may have ducked a little bit here or something, but we never, but this was the first day on Christmas Eve of 1944, we went into Foxholes, and it was cold. It was, that's, if anybody ever talks about the Battle of the Bulge, the one thing they remember, never been so, you know, so cold in my life, you know, this.
Because you couldn't build fires.
Huh?
You couldn't build fires.
No.
Because that would give your position away, so.
No, but anyway, we were there for only a short time, then we moved on, I think, to Wiltz, Germany, and then we went to a place called Trier, and there we gave a special training on some, it was like a motorboat or an outboard motor that when it hit the beach, it was especially that it had 2 engineers, one in the front and one in the back, and then there'd be maybe like 8 infantrymen that we would take, you know, on this particular thing. But we had all this training up there, and this was on the Moselle River at Trier. Anyway, but the time came when they moved us down to the Rhine. And the time came, now, I was kind of in a reserve with another guy called Lenny, my partner. He was on our particular boat, but we never had the training. We only went over the back once and forth. But here we were in a large building. I think it was a schoolhouse or something like that. And here, coming from on down the Rhine, they said, you know, they needed another you know, group to handle one of these boats going down there. So anyway, he went through, because I thought, well, all these other guys have all this experience and so what, they had much more than I did. So they went through the whole building asking for people, and I guess guys just didn't want to go. But you know, I guess I got this from my father, you know, it's not stupidity, but you kind of get yourself involved a little bit. You know, open your mouth when you shouldn't, you know, and said, you know, but here the guy needed somebody, and nobody was saying anything. So anyway, I said, yeah, sure, we'll go. And then Lenny, he said, what, Carr, you're trying to get me killed, you know, so, well, Lenny, I said, come on, Lenny, you can't live forever. So anyway, we did. We went, Lenny and I got in the Jeep, and we went down there to the Rhine, and as we got there, and we saw the boat, and we got in, and an officer came over to me, and he said, forget it. He said that we've already had 2 of these boats knocked out. You know, the Germans had a 20 millimeter or something that was zeroed in on because the Rhine has a very severe current, and you know, but they had that. Well, anyway, 2 boats had been knocked down, so he said, we're not going to send any more boats down. So this is another time that God came in to save me, because I don't know what they, but anyway, they had these Navy LSDs or something, we're going to take them over, which took them over. So anyway, that was the first time. But then on the Rhine also, we built 2 bridges, 2 of the longest bridges that were ever built. They were pontoon bridges. One at a place called Nierstein, which is, you know, well, it's right near a town called, it's up the river from Mainz, and this is where we built the second one, was Mainz. Mainz was a much bigger town. Nierstein was only a little, but Patton came down there and gave us a commendation for getting up, because when we got able to get the tanks and so forth, but you had to keep going out on on the bridge and tightening some lugs because the current was so, and of course you take, that was like 1,800 feet or something like that. You know, it was the width of the Rhine is pretty good and the current. So, but anyway, in the mornings, we all had to take turns, but in this one early morning, I was out there in the middle of the bridge all by myself, tightening these lugs and so forth. And here coming down the river is two German, I think they were called 108s or something. They were German aircraft, and they had a bomb underneath them as they come. So I'm here. I'm what the hell? You know, here I am. You know, I can see these planes coming at me, so I started to run. Well, I knew I couldn't get off the bridge in time, so I jumped into a pontoon. That's all I could, and waited. Well, anyway, the first guy dropped his bomb, and he came up sharp. And then I still stayed there, and the second guy came up, and his went over the bridge. You know, another time God was there with me.
Yeah.
You know, so good. Anyway, because I couldn't swim very well. That's why I got in the Army instead of the Navy. So, but anyway, we did get that bridge, and then we built this other bridge at Mainz. Now, in building the bridge at Nierstein, after we were there, building this thing up, the Germans start throwing in some 88s, and you know, 88s. I think you've heard of that. It's not like it's the shell with the L from an 88 hit. The shrapnel all goes forward. Well, I was fortunate that I was down by the water's edge, and all these 88s, they came a little bit over the top of my head, and the shrapnel went forward. Well, 2 or 3 guys got killed, a couple guys lost their eye, and Joe Lubinsky, one of the guys I played ball with on the company ball team, he didn't make it. You know, I always think about, you know, him and so forth. It's one guy, Ed McKinney, I always remember that a piece of shrapnel went into his helmet and came out the other side without touching his head. Well, of course, we all said that there wasn't anything under the touch anyway, you know. But anyway, but that was, you know, our time on the Rhine. And after our time on the Rhine, you're running out of film?
No.
I'm gonna play that.
Well, anyway, then after the time on the Rhine, we stayed there for a while, just maintaining the bridges along the Rhine. And then while we were there, I think May the 7th or whatever it was, but the war came to an end. And they sent us to a town called Regensburg, which we were there for a short time, just, I don't know what we were really doing. But, and then after that, we went to another place not too far. It was close to the Danube River, a place called Plattling. And at Plattling, because we were engineers, we built for displaced persons, you know, some barracks and so forth, because all over Europe there was displaced people who had lost their homes and so forth. So we built these particular barracks and so forth and so on. And I was a corporal at that time, you know. So anyway, every morning I would have to go to, there was right near where we built was a German POW, a prison camp. And we would go up and I would get a group. I had my particular group of guys that would follow me, and then we would go to our particular barracks and I'd say, here's you know, we'd give them the tools and here's the plans.
So you were using German POWs for labor?
These are German POWs. They did all the work. They did the work, and they were good workers, I'll say that for them. Most of them were SS troopers. And they went, anyway, went through this whole rigmarole. And a side thing to that, which you might say, is that from that particular thing, you know, the guys and I, you know, the war was over, and I had I wasn't going to shoot any Germans at this particular time, but so I got along with them pretty well. They had an interpreter, and I would talk with him, and we smiled a lot, and cut up a little bit, I guess, even though they were an enemy, I didn't, you know, my war days were over, you know, so forth. But anyway, later on, after I came home, I became a salesman, selling plumbing and pipe fittings, but later on a sales manager. And one of my customers was a tough German guy that he was a plumber, but he worked real hard and so forth. And he and I became real good friends, and this one day he invited me down to his house for lunch to meet his wife Teresa, and I went down there for lunch. And we went down to lunch. He had a little room on the side, and he took me in the room and sat down, and he showed me some pictures. And these pictures were pictures of Plattling, Germany. I said, yeah, Plattling. I said, yeah, I know about Plattling. I was in Plattling. He said, did you have red hair? And did you smile a lot? And when you were talking to the interpreter and get along? And I said, yeah. He says, I was in your group. Talk about a small world,
sure.
And how in the hell he could remember me after, how many years was that? Geez, 25 years or so,
wow.
But in fact, I just went out to lunch with him a couple of weeks ago, so we still meet and still get along. So there's still a little bit of things that come from the war that well, I guess there's a lot of other stories that I did. But there was one other little thing. Now this is a good thing that happened. After we built the DP camps, we came back to Regensburg, and we milled around a little bit. And anyway, the battalion had a raffle, and I think there was 2 names from each company were picked. Well, anyway, I was one of the names that was picked. I won. And I won a trip to the French Riviera. Took a trip all the way down there into Nice. It's the first time I ever saw girls in a bikini. Kind of shook me up a little bit.
Especially after you just come from the war,
on the G-Sir. But anyway, besides that, another incident happened there that never happened to me before. They put us up in a real nice hotel called Hotel Luxembourg. And we went in there, and the first night I was there, I was in the bed, and I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was red. I had little bites all over me. And here, I had never seen bed bugs before, but they had bed bugs, and this is what the other guy was with me told me. He said, those are bed bugs, and so forth. And, geez. Well, anyway, I had to sleep on the floor for the next 4 nights or whatever we were there. So, but
it still beats a foxhole, though, right?
What?
It still beats a foxhole.
No. So anyway, those are just little things that kind of hit you. But then I came. The sad part, I came back to Regensburg after my trip down to southern France, and came back. But then when we got back there, all my friends were gone. They had been transferred out to different places, and of course there was still, there's just a couple of us still there. Anyway, but there was still, but anyway, we had a notice on the bulletin board about a school that they were opening up for anybody that graduated from high school at a place in England called Scrivenham American University, and it's right part of Oxford. And it was just only going to be a 3-month course or something like that. So I thought, and gee, I was struggling trying to communicate with the German people anyway. So anyway, I thought, gee, that's good. I'll go to England. So anyway, I signed up for it, and I was accepted, and I went to England, and it was great. They had real good teachers they brought over from America, but the main thing is visiting all the different places. I got to go to London many times, and Cardiff, and Newcastle, and so many of the different places within England. And then I also made arrangements that I was going to go get a little pass because I had relatives over in County Sligo, over in Ireland, and I was going to go over, and my grandmother had set up the time for me to go over and meet some of my relatives over in Ireland. So, but at that particular time, the Army changed their point count, and now I have enough points to go home. Now, what do I want to do? Go to Ireland, these people I don't know or haven't seen at all, or do I want to come home and see my parents and that I haven't been home for 2.5 years or something like that. So I didn't go to Ireland. I know my grandmother was disappointed, but I did come home, and I got home. Well, didn't make it for Christmas, but I got home right after the first of the year. I think I was discharged on December the 28th of 1945, and then but then I got home, and then even at that, when I got home, nobody was home. So what to do with myself? So Xavier was just opening up a semester, so I started out at, I went to a semester out at Xavier University for a while. So, I don't know.
I had a couple of questions. When the war ended in Germany,
Yeah.
were you, I know a lot of veterans I've talked to, they were afraid that they were going to be shipped over the Pacific because the war hadn't ended there. Was that something that you were concerned about, or did your unit not fall into that category that you were going to be going over?
I'll tell you, there wasn't too much talk about that.
Okay.
No, I just don't recall too much of that. I think maybe because we were involved in that, the building of that DP camp, that took us, you know, into a little bit later, and then the outfit was, the 249th were shipped out to some place up near Cherbourg, and I never did get to see, you know, some of those guys again. And then, but one thing did come from that, you know, coming out of that, you know, when you come home, and then they give you this intensive thing about joining the reserve, you know, and of course I was with a bunch of cynical guys, and you know, they said, you know, I had my turn, and I don't want any more, and all that. I said, well, I agree with it. But my friend Eddie Poos, he listened to that, and he did sign up for reserve. And he used to tell me, oh, what a great time the reserves are, Jim. He said, we have a meeting, you know, once or twice a month, and we play cards and drink beer, and it's a great time. All of a sudden, things opened up in Korea, and Eddie was in the hospital having their first child, and he got orders. He had a report. On Friday, he was in the hospital with his new baby. On Sunday, he was in Korea, and he said, first of all, he said it was a lot worse for him because, first of all, he got lice, and a lot of guys, this is one thing that guys got in Korea. And he said, the other thing was, he said they were crazy, the Chinese. He said, you know, they would just keep coming over, and you'd fire the machine gun, and they would just keep going over the top of each other, even though you fired it, you know, and so forth and so on. And he said they were just mowing them down, but they'd keep coming. And I guess that was the orders they take, he said. But he said, as far as he was concerned, Korea was a lot tougher than what he'd done. And it was cold there too. Sure. All of a sudden it was cold. He didn't miss out on the cold. Yeah.
Just if you could really quickly, I don't really know this, and I'd love for you to explain to me. How do you build a pontoon bridge? What goes into that? I'm just sort of.
And what?
How do you build a pontoon bridge? Just sort of an overview.
Well, a pontoon bridge is built with floats. You know, and you take it out and you push out. You know, and there was the one is we call a floating bailing bridge we did, and you know what a bailing bridge is?
No.
A bailing bridge, and they're a fabricated bridge, and they come with all different kind of parts. You know, some of them are pretty big, and you have to clip them together and put the pins together, and take 3 or 4 guys. You put them in, they are maybe like 10 or 12 foot sections, and you build it, and you slowly push it out from the shore, and until it goes over. But you have to have more weight on this side than you have on this. So anyway, and I guess there's got to be a limit to what it goes, but it's almost like a big record set, putting the thing together and pushing out. And the same thing is with the pontoon. The only thing is the pontoons, which are a great big rubber raft, and you have numerous, and they pull one up, and you put a section on, and they pull up another one, and you section, and finally, and then you put the floorboards on, or whatever it is, the board, so that in fact, then the tanks, you know, you get it tied down, and the tanks go on over. So is it? Yeah.
So on a bailing bridge, does a bailing bridge float on the water?
No,
also,
a bailing bridge is ordinarily a stationary bridge. The only time would be a floating bailing bridge is when you attach it to a pontoon. Okay. Now there is another type of a pontoon bridge that we built. I think it was in Mainz. We built a couple of different kinds of pontoon bridges, but they're all built on floats. You know, floats. And a pontoon is a large uh, it's a large float, you know, so,
Sure.
and it's stocky enough to, but of course, that you have to, controlling the current and also, not only that, but you have to have guide wires and so forth, holding it and pulling it together and so forth and so. And then after you get the thing out, there were so many guys that were killed up above that constantly we were headed to remove the dead bodies, the corpses from the because they would be floating downstream and taking them off and the grave registration they would so that's, you know, Bailey Bridge. And of course we built a lot of fixed bridges too, where we used lumber. You bring lumber and put that stuff in. So now, you know, all our officers were pretty good engineers, and they knew exactly how we had to dig and where we put the stuff, you know, so forth and so on. And you know, as a 19-year-old kid, you know, I was a laborer, carried and pushed and hammered and whatever had to be done with all the other kinds of guys. But that and yeah. Oh, I guess there was other times though. Taking up mines is something else again. You know, a germ. I told you a teller mine was 12 pounds of TNT, and there were some guys that, you know, that. And the Germans did booby trap them. If you pick it up and they got a booby trap tied in, you got 12 pounds of TNT, and you don't last when they do 12 pounds of. But there was one particular time when we had a small stream, and it was just a little cold. There was a little bit of film ice towards the thing, and anyway, there was you could see down in the water. There was about, and this was like they call a ford in the stream. A ford is where it's low enough that you can take your trucks or your tanks and go through that particular area. And of course the Germans know that, and they put all these mines through there. I think there was about 6 mines that were going over this, but it was down in there. So anyway, all these guys, and we had a pair of boots, one size fits all. I don't know how the hell that one size fits all. But anyway, how it always works out, it seems like I always got the neck of the chicken. But anyway, the one size fits all only fit me. I don't know how the hell it would. But anyway, but I had to go down. I had to take off my shirt. But going down in that water, I mean, I was turning blue after a while taking. But the Germans, and then I had to check a little bit to be sure that they weren't booby. I don't see how they could have booby trapped. Well, they didn't. I didn't. But after a while, my arms were so cold and blue from going down in the water and taking those things up that I didn't. And I would just take them. And at this one particular time, because we were building a little, you know, a little bridge, a walking bridge alongside of it. My officer, Lieutenant Popovich, was coming by, and I had to get rid of this, and I took it and handed it to him, and he was like in shock, you know. I handed him 12 pounds of TNT, but that were other times to take. The Germans were, it's one thing I saw every weapon that the Germans had. One time above Nancy in France, you know the buzz bombs that will. And I don't know, I think we're on some kind of reconnaissance or something, but above the hill above Nancy, and you could see, and they sounded like an old washing machine, pop, 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 as they came across. And then they stopped, and when they stopped, that's when they started down. Well, they started down, and there was 2 of them that came over. One of them stopped and went down on the ground and went down into a valley. It must have been, I'd say, almost a mile from where we were at, but of course we could see it. And the explosion was really, it just ripped up the trees and everything else. So you can see what they could have done, but that was one. And then they had the other one that went over and it just kept going. It was heading towards Nancy. So anyway, but that was one. But the Germans had so many other kind of mines. They had one mine, you know, that you couldn't detect with a mine detector. It was a small box. And then, like, the top of the box would be open, and there was like a little plastic nail or something that would hit the detonator, and this happened with quite a few infantrymen before, but it blew off their knee, blew off their leg right to the knee. So and this happened near Wiltz in Luxembourg, but we had to get on the ground and kind of, you know, make pass and push the snow away, because you couldn't, it snowed the night before, and you couldn't see these things. So. And the German, well, anyway, that was one. That was they had another one called a Bouncing Betsy, which was a can. And inside the can was, a whole bunch of BBs, you know, pretty good sized BBs. And on the top was a little fork thing like it. And if you stepped on that and pushed that down, and this thing came up about 4 feet and then it exploded. And these beads, these steel beads, and it you know, would injure and all, probably kill some particular guys, but there was, anyway, I got to know quite a bit about mines. Not that I wanted to know, huh?
So when you swept for mines, you actually just had to physically pick the mines up and dispose of them?
Not all the time. Sometimes when we were a little bit dubious and we didn't, you know, didn't want to screw around with thinking about whether they were detonated, we would put, you know, a quarter-pound of TNT on there and blow it up, and then blow it up right where it is, and so that it, you know, that way it doesn't affect anybody and so forth. So that those are the things that. But yeah. Oh well, there were some scary times and some, you know, good times, and I'd say camaraderie, being with a bunch of guys and suffering along, you know, with the guys. Most of my old buddies are all gone now. We have reunions, but nobody hardly makes it anymore. You know, there's nobody. Hey, I'm 82. You know, you got to see it. And I was one of the younger ones. You know, and I was, you know, it's that 18 and 19, 18 when I went in 19. So forth, and most of them are a little bit older than that. You know, so many of them are gone. But you know, it was a good experience. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for doing the interview. Is there anything else that you can think of that you want to talk about before we close here? Or?
I can't right now. I think we've hit on all the points.
Okay. Well, thanks again, and thanks for your service to our country. And
yeah.